Welcome back to the Manor. Julian McBain here, and we are hunting robots. I really enjoy this area. This is the first time I've actually really enjoyed hunting robots. Got something different to talk about today. Well, not overly different, but different enough. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the Manor. Please take a moment and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Also, please consider going to patreon.com/JulianMcBain if you want to support my work. If you do, you'll get exclusive content. Speaking of which, I gotta get the exclusive for this month done. So that should be coming out soon. So yeah, I've been listening to various various things and like audio casts and stuff like that, and this one that I ran across, it posed a question, and this is a good question. It's one I never really thought about before, and it's what stories are we telling ourselves that are false, right? Because I talk about different stories that are kind of built into our society, the myths, the old myths, the Bible, the Pinocchio story, Sleeping Beauty, all of these things that kind of undergird what our society is, and they're allegories for life. But there are things that we tell ourselves that are categorically false, and a lot of them tend to be self-sabotaging in nature. And it made me really think about a lot of the things that I tell myself about myself that may not in fact be true. And I didn't realize just how many of those ideas we get in our head that might not be what we think they are. Now, they could totally be true. And usually confirmation comes from outside. So if you're looking at something and you can go to a friend who knows you, right? And you'd be like, this is what I'm perceiving. Is this correct? And they might say, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. Or they'll be saying, no, it's not as I see it. And if you ask, 3 friends, you're going to get 4 answers. But it's one of those things where whoever can provide the best evidence will likely be the most true. And I mean, I firmly believe in the use of both Occam's and Hanlon's razor when it comes to stuff like this, especially when it comes to interactions with other people. The simplest solution is probably the most true. And never attribute malice. What could be better explained by incompetence. But outside of relationships with people, it's more like skill set. If you go into something, you're like, I'm terrible at this, I'm terrible at this, I'm terrible at this. You're going to be terrible at it because you're convincing yourself you're terrible at it. And even when you're good at it, you could actually degrade your own skill by convincing yourself that you're bad. And that really kind of hit me because I had a tournament recently, and it had been 2 years since I've actually fought in a tournament. And of course it's been 2 years. We've all been under basically lockdown from COVID. And so I went into the tournament just wanting to play. And after the fact, I realized a couple of things. And these are things I did not realize I was experiencing at the time. One, throughout the whole process, I was pretty much a bundle of anxiety. Now, I'm someone who generally has good control over anxiety. And anyone who says they don't get anxiety is lying. Everyone feels anxiety over things when things are new or unknown. It's how well you can control that anxiety that's important. It's just like when you're afraid of something, you can't make yourself less afraid. You can only make yourself more courageous. Because courage will trump fear every single time. As long as you have enough courage, anything you're afraid of doesn't matter. But you have to have the courage. And courage can be built, but fear can never be degraded. It's actually very interesting. You apparently can train a phobia into someone, and once they have that phobia, it will never go away. But after you train the phobia into them, you can't train it back out of them. It's ingrained, it's there. It turns basically, they map the fear of the item or the object onto the same circuit that is for threat detection. Essentially, that's probably an oversimplification, but it works something like that. I've probably got the details wrong. If there are any psychologists out there that are that actually watch this out of, morbid fascination, please correct me. But you can overcome it not by reducing the fear, but by increasing the courage. John Wayne once said that courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway. And that's true. And so it got me to thinking about, they say, and this is the Warrior something. He was talking about these 7 pits, and I was on the first one, the Pit of Pain, and it's like, what are the stories you're telling yourself that are false? What do you think about yourself that is wrong? The I'm not good enough, I'm ugly, I'm incapable, I'm not competent, I'm useless. How many of these things are you saying that are wrong? And that really kind of hit me, because I didn't think I was the type of person to think like that. But then it occurred to me, you don't just sit there. I mean, with the exception of some people who are, clinically depressed. You don't just sit there and say, I'm useless at everything. You talk about, like, specific areas of your life, right? So, like, as an example, if I feel bad about myself in fencing, I might convince myself that I'm terrible at fencing. Well, I have evidence, like physical evidence, that is not the case. Awards I've gotten in tournaments, the scarf I got from training, all of these things are proofs that I'm not terrible. Now, I may not be the best at it. I'm certainly not a master, but I'm not as bad as my brain will sometimes try to make me think. And those are all things that we really need to take into account, right? And you're going to have things that affect you like this too. Guaranteed. And finding ways to overcome that is really important. Good Lord. I'm swimming in these things. Because if you can't overcome those stories about yourself, those preconceived notions you have in your brain, you're never going to progress. Well, how do you do that? Well, I think you have to go back to basics. It's what you have to do. And usually if something is entrenched in your brain, the best way to fix it is to go back to the basic model of how you do other things. And so, how do you learn a skill? Well, you have to go practice. And how do you practice? You pick up the item that's involved with building the skill, and you do the thing over and over and over again. It's a grind, just like Entropia Universe. It's a grind. You have to grind at it. It's just like video games. You have to grind at it. You have to grind at it and get better and better and better. And at first you're gonna suck, and that's just the way it works. And you have to dare to be bad. You have to dare to make mistakes, or else you're never gonna get anywhere. And this is true of anything. It's not just of like physical skills like fencing or shooting or playing tennis or soccer or football for everyone except for Americans, or that game that's really wearing too much armor to play a bit of rugby with an odd-shaped ball, American football. But it's also in things like friendships and building relationships and getting a significant other, maintaining a significant, maintaining the relationship with a significant other. Maintaining your relationship with your kids if you have them, with your friends and with your colleagues. These are all things that you're gonna make mistakes on, and you have to make the mistakes to know what it is you need to do. Maybe when you try, you only succeed, 25% of the time, or you're only crisp, like 25% skill level. Well, that's fine, because even if you only succeed at first 1% of the time, 1% is so much higher than 0, you have no idea. And I mean that. 1% is absurdly higher than 0. And then you start to build. And a lot of times, especially if you're starting at 0, and starting at 0 is incredibly hard. you have to overcome these preconceived notions you have about yourself, because if you fail, you're just going to wallow. And it's so easy to just let yourself wallow. It is, because it's easy to let yourself wallow because that's the easy thing to do. You know, it's so much simpler to just not bother. And it occurs to me that, yeah, you could screw up, and it could screw things up permanently with friends or with family, or you could hurt yourself. But it sure as hell beats not trying. You know what I'm saying? You know, if you don't try, if you don't dare to fail, if you don't dare to risk failure, let me try that again. If you don't dare to risk failure, you'll never succeed at anything. And that really hit me hard. That really hit me hard because I never really thought of it that way, right? Like when I went to that tournament and I only managed to get out of, I think it was 21 possible points because every pass was a point. And so for those of you who don't fence, I'm going to do a quick rundown. A pass is where you're fighting each other, and the first person to hit the other person in a kill zone, that's a pass. A bout is all of the passes within a single match with someone, a single matchup or a single round with a person. So in this one, it was 3 passes per bout. And then there were 7 of us fighting. So we each had, no, there were 8 of us fighting. So we each had 21, we had 7 bouts and 21 passes. Okay? And it was round robin. So we all got to fight each other. And so I got 3 passes out of 21. And it was, frankly, it was discouraging. Because I didn't think I'd lost that much. I'd been able to do some practicing. But it occurred to me that, you know, part of it was because I was too focused in my head, and part of it was because I was a bundle of anxiety that I allowed myself to convince myself I wasn't going to do great, because I was nervous about being back among people I had not been with for 2 years. And that's what it was. And it wasn't until I was on the ride home that I realized that a lot of my problems were anxiety. And you know, for a lot of, in a lot of ways, I think part of my problem is I allowed myself back before to kind of rest on my laurels, and I was kind of getting to the point where I felt I needed a mentor again, and I was out seeking one just before COVID came crashing down on all our heads, of which I have actually decided to lay aside until I get my basics back down, and I'm back to where I was pre-pandemic. And I think for a lot of us, that's actually important. Now, that doesn't mean we abandon looking, because you could find one along the way. But at the same time, it's not my focus. And there are certain things that you can only focus on so many things at a time. Anyone who thinks that they can focus on everything at once is fooling themselves. So you could have different things going on in your life, but you have to focus on one aspect of each individual thing. So, you know, as a set of examples, for fencing, I'm focusing on rebuilding my basics, my footwork, my blade work, my balance. Those are the basics. Those are the bare minimum I need to do. In my regular job, I'm focusing on being the best office manager and supervisor I can, and making sure that at the end of the day, all of the customers that needed to be called were called. Now, that seems like it's a really broad thing, but it all falls under this kind of narrower skill set of what are the key pieces of my job. And those are the 3 key pieces of my job. So, so there's that aspect of my life, and then there's my relationship with my son, and I've come to the realization that I need to make sure I'm spending anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes with him a day. And that doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not, but apparently I've been doing some research, and that's really what they need. That's what teenagers need, is roughly 20 minutes a day. And that doesn't mean that, you know, it's like, okay, the 20 minutes is up, time to get, no. That's the minimum. And so that's on the list too. And so making sure that I build and maintain my relationship with my son, and that he's progressing and he's feeling more fulfilled, and, you know, trying to be the best father that I can. Um, and then in I don't have a romantic relationship right now. Trying to remember how to go about doing that. Because after 2 years with focus everywhere else, and we've all been in a high stress zone, believe me, you forget shit. And the landscape has changed so much compared to when I was, you know, a 21-year-old. You know, at the age of 18, you still ask people for their phone numbers. Nowadays, it's, I don't know, follow them on Twitter and send them a DM, I guess. But yeah, so I mean, all of these things, you have to focus on one aspect of all of the important things in your life. And so, and then you focus in on that and you build that piece as much as you can, and then you alter focus to the next one without letting the one you just finished degrade. Not as easy as it sounds, but it can be done. And doing that will help you change your own opinion of yourself. And I know it's something I got to work on. I've been working. I was really progressing prior to the pandemic, and I just let myself go for 2 years because, you know, well, we can't get out there and do anything, so why bother, right? And boy, wasn't that a mistake on my part. And, you know, and I'll make a culpa to that. And I know I'm not the only one, but that doesn't make it right, and that doesn't mean I was correct to do so. And so I'm realizing now that the old habits kind of crept back into the lifestyle that I lead because I had an excuse to not do what I was supposed to do. And in some cases, I was prevented from doing it, to be fair. But, you know, there was no fencing practice for almost 2 years. I really can't help that. I was able to get out and fence with my son a couple of times. There was a couple of friends I could fence with once in a great while, but it wasn't consistent. But there's plenty of other things I could have been doing to kind of build up. And so yeah, that's where we're at. And I allowed all of these preconceptions to come filtering back into my brain space, and I know I'm not the only one. I know for a fact I'm not the only one, because I know I have friends who are running into the same thing, and it's like, no, you gotta get back that brain space you were in before the pandemic, because, you know, we're coming out of it, and it's going to be slow, and there's going to be a lot of hesitation, and, you know, there's a lot of mixed messages going on right now. But it's important, and we need to do these things and just get back on track. You know, we can't let the last 2 years control the rest of our lives. And yeah, it means we're going to lose another year getting back to where we were, but that's not a loss. That's not, and I'm going to correct myself. I should not consider that a loss, and neither should you. It's what we're going to gain from using that year to rebuild the things we lost is the knowledge that we can do it. Because at some point, there are pieces we're going to let slide, and we're going to end up back in a similar position. Maybe not lifestyle-wide, maybe not life-wide, but on specific items. You're going to get there. I mean, some people live that cycle, right? Where it's you build yourself up and then you just let it go. And this was something that was mentioned in that podcast I was listening to. And he called it the karmic culdesac, because in his example, and I'll have to get the name of the guy, and I'm sorry I don't have it off the top of my head. Warrior Minded, I think, is his program. You build yourself up and then you burn it all down, and then you build yourself up and then you burn it all down. You just do the stupid things you know are going to cause problems. And he's right. A lot of people do that, including myself, and it's something that I need to work on. I knew I needed to work on. And COVID gave the perfect excuse. And that's not good. It's not good at all. You know, we've got to figure out how to better conduct ourselves. And there's ways to do it. I mean, we all know that there's things that we should be doing. You know, it doesn't have to be we happy, few happy time fun, you know, dosed up to the eyeballs on joy. I really need to play that game again. But, yeah. Let's play We Happy Few, the simulator for real life today. No, not quite that bad yet, but, Australia. I shouldn't pick on Australia. I shouldn't. And I know a friend of mine watches this, and I don't mean to cast shade at Oz per se. But I mean, shit's terrifying, guys. It is. And the only thing we can do is continue to build ourselves up. You know, push back where you need to, but really just build yourself up and help those around you build themselves up. And keep in mind, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. If they don't want to build themselves up, if they want to wallow, then you can't stop them from wallowing. You know, you can talk to them, you can encourage them, even cajole them, but you can't force them. And for some people, that's really hard. For someone like me who, back before the pandemic, did mentoring and was trying to move into that space, that kind of that mentoring through martial arts kind of life coaching type thing. I wasn't building a business off it, but I really enjoyed it. And I think it's because I used to do lay ministry back in the day, which is, believe it or not, very, very similar in a lot of ways. Just secularized. But there's a lot that can be done if you build up yourself. And there are going to be people who are going to poo-poo you, and they're going to not like the fact that you're progressing, because what they're seeing is you're doing the things they don't want to do. They don't want to have to do the work to get there. Ah, crap. And because of it, they feel bad about themselves, and they don't want you getting any further than they are. And there are people out there like that. And they don't understand why they can't get any further than they are. And when other people are progressing past them, they're jealous. And I know a few people like that too. And they wallow in their own misery, and they're worthless. And they make excuses. And that jealousy is the worst possible place you can be. That jealousy is the worst possible place you can be. Because you're not helping anyone. You're not helping yourself. You're not helping your family. You're not building your own life. And you're not helping your friends. All you're saying is that you're justified in your uselessness. And a lot of times these arguments come out as some rationalizations, and some come out as compassion. And I'm serious about that. A lot of them come out as compassionate arguments. My least favorite one of all is a person's value is not based on their production. And my answer to that is no shit. But a person without purpose, and more often than not, what a person does helps them build their purpose. A person without purpose slips into depression very, very quickly. And the psychological evidence for that is extremely clear. There's nothing worse than a person who has no purpose. And I don't mean that from like a good and evil sense. I mean from a psychological sense. Depression comes quick when you are purposeless. It comes really fast. And we're talking like clinical levels. And so you got to find purpose. You got to figure out what you're going to do, and to get to that purpose. And you're not necessarily able to construct that purpose artificially, although you can. There are some parts of your purpose that will come naturally, and some people think it comes from a divine source. Some people think it comes from, the universe. Some people just seem to think that their brain finally clicks on something, and I don't know who is correct. Now, I have my opinion, but my opinion could be wrong. I honestly think it's a combination of all three, to be upfront. But that's my opinion. Other people might disagree. Other people might think you have to 100% construct your own purpose. And there are people out there that have not been able to find their purpose. And I don't know. Not having a purpose, it's better to have... what's a good way to put this? It's better to have a purpose that seems really silly or insignificant than to have no purpose at all. And I mean that. I mean that. It's better to have, even if your purpose... Global! 70 pet. Thank you, Cyrene. It is better to have a purpose where your whole purpose is to just make sure your dog is okay than to not have a purpose at all. I know people who have literally survived horrific things just to make sure their dog is fed and taken care of. There are people who have lived through just horrific circumstances just to make sure their dog is fed, just to take care of their pets. Now, for a lot of us, we'd see that as, if that's your life purpose, that's kind of silly. No, it's not. You gave yourself purpose. This is why there seems to be an overall for life happiness, and I don't remember where I saw this. I will have to try to look this up. And keep in mind that most of these things are self-reporting. People who report being the happiest are people who have families. So like spouse and children. Because the family becomes integrated in part of their purpose. Now, I know for a fact that I would be far less happy if I didn't have my son. And yes, he's 13, so there are rough patches. There are things that go wrong. There are things that, you've got to go through all the bumps and bruises and the arguments and the fights and all of the stuff that you do with your kids. It's part of living. It's part of having kids. But frankly, I have never found a more worthwhile pursuit than being a father. And so that's what it's about. It's about finding purpose. And I found my purpose in being a dad, and that's a big part of my purpose. It's not my only purpose, but it's a big part of my purpose. And I'm exploring returning to a piece of purpose that I had when I was younger. And so, yeah, that's what I got for you guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. And as always, I really appreciate the support, and we'll see you in the next one.